Major William Carter wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the settings on his scanner. The air in the cave system was stale and cold, but his suit's internal temperature had risen from the 6-hour exploration. Beneath the surface of Proxima Centauri B's largest moon, Carter checked his oxygen levels, still good for another 3 hours, then signaled to the rest of his 5-person team to continue forward. "Anything interesting yet, Susan?" Carter asked over the comlink. Dr. Susan Miller, the team's xenobiologist, shook her head. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes were focused on her own scanner. "Just the usual mineral deposits. Some interesting crystal formations, but nothing alive," Carter nodded. He hadn't expected much from this mission. Earth Defense Force had sent them to this desolate moon to look for resources and map the terrain. It was supposed to be routine boring even. After 3 weeks of finding nothing but rocks and dust, Carter was ready to head back to the main base. "Let's push forward another half-mile, then call it a day," Carter said. "We'll move to Sector 7 tomorrow." The team continued through the winding tunnel. The cave walls sparkled with blue-white crystals that reflected their flashlights, creating an eerie, beautiful glow. Their boots crunched on the rocky ground, the sound echoing in the silence. 20 minutes later, Private Lisa Jones, who was leading the group, stopped suddenly. "Sir, you need to see this." Carter moved to the front of the group. The tunnel opened into a large cavern, easily 100 yards across. The ceiling rose so high their lights couldn't reach it. But what caught Carter's attention wasn't the size of the cave, it was what stood in its center. A humanoid figure, about 6 feet tall, stood perfectly still on a raised platform of the same crystal that lined the walls. The figure was completely covered in what looked like metal armor. The armor shifted colors as they watched, deep blue to purple to silver, rippling like liquid even though it was clearly solid. "Is that a statue?" asked Sergeant Alan Peters, taking a step forward. "Don't get too close," Carter warned, but it was too late. As Peters approached, the armor suddenly sprouted dozens of sharp, pointed spikes extending outward like a threatened porcupine. Peters jumped back, nearly falling over. "What the hell?" he gasped. Dr. Miller pushed her way to the front, her scanner held out in front of her. It's alive." "There are life signs inside that armor, humanoid, but not human." Carter felt his heart rate spike. In 15 years with Earth Defense Force, he had never encountered a living alien species. None of them had. Humanity had found ruins, artifacts, evidence of civilizations long gone but never living beings. "Everyone stay back," Carter ordered. He approached slowly, his hand near his weapon but not drawing it. The armor responded again, the spikes extending toward him but not as aggressively as before. Carter stopped 10 feet away. "Susan, what else can you tell me?" Miller studied her scanner, eyes wide with excitement. "The armor appears to be some kind of technology, not natural. And there's definitely someone inside it, female, based on the body structure, but she's in some kind of stasis. Minimal life signs, almost like hibernation." "How long has she been here?" Carter asked. Miller shook her head in disbelief. "Based on the dust patterns and crystal growth around the platform, centuries, maybe longer." The team fell silent, trying to process this information. Carter studied the armored figure with growing fascination. Now that he looked closer, he could see the feminine shape beneath the shifting metal, slender arms, curved hips, a graceful neck leading to a featureless helmet. "Set up the portable lab," Carter decided. "We need to document everything before we report back to command." For the next 3 hours, the team worked methodically around the figure. They took readings, soil samples, and hundreds of pictures. They tried different instruments to scan through the armor, but nothing could penetrate. The armor continued to react whenever anyone got too close, but it seemed most aggressive toward Peters and Jones, less so toward Miller and Dr. Frank White, and least of all toward Carter. "It might be responding to perceived threat levels," Miller suggested. "You're approaching with curiosity, not fear. It might sense that somehow." As the others packed up equipment, Carter found himself standing alone before the armored figure. The rest of the team was just out of earshot. On impulse, He spoke aloud. "Can you hear me? Do you understand who we are? Where we come from?" The armor didn't respond with movement, but Carter could have sworn the color-shifting patterns changed, becoming more organized, almost like writing. He stepped closer, and for once, the armor didn't sprout its defensive spikes. "We're not here to hurt you," Carter continued softly. "We're explorers from a planet called Earth." A strange feeling came over Carter, a sense that he was being studied, evaluated. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He nearly jumped when his cum unit buzzed. "Sir, we've got command on the line," Jones called from the cave entrance. "They want a status report." Carter reluctantly turned away from the armored figure. "I'll be right there." Later, as the team made camp near the cave entrance, Carter delivered his report to Earth Command. Admiral Doris Wright's face looked grim. "On the small screen, you're certain it's alive?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Dr. Miller confirmed it. "We have a living alien, preserved somehow in this armor." Admiral Wright was quiet for a moment. "We're sending a transport ship with a containment unit. Prepare the subject for transport back to Earth Research Station Alpha." Carter felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. "With respect, Admiral, we don't know if moving her is safe for her or for us. The armor is clearly defensive. It might see transport as a threat." "Your concerns are noted, Major," Wright said, her tone making it clear the decision was final. "The transport will arrive in 2 weeks. Until then, learn what you can." After the call ended, Carter sat alone, staring at the stars. The discovery should have felt like the highlight of his career. Instead, he felt uneasy. Something about that armor, about the being inside it, called to him in a way he couldn't explain. That night, Carter dreamed of drowning in liquid metal that burned cold against his skin. He heard a voice, distant and distorted, calling for help in a language he didn't understand. When he woke, gasping for breath, he knew what he had to do. The next morning, he returned to the cavern alone. The armored figure stood exactly as before, shimmering in the light of his flashlight. Carter approached slowly, hands open at his sides. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said quietly, "but I want to help you. Somehow, I'm going to find a way." As if in response, the armor's surface rippled, the patterns forming what looked almost like a face for just a moment before dissolving back into random swirls. Carter smiled despite himself. "Well, that's a start," he said. "My name is William Carter, and I promise you're not alone anymore." For the first time in centuries, Alara, the last child of a dead civilization, felt something other than fear. Inside her prison of living metal, a small spark of hope began to grow. Over the next week, Carter visited the cavern whenever he could. Sometimes he brought Dr. Miller or other team members, but he preferred his time alone with the armored figure. He began to think of her as a person, not just a discovery. He talked to her about Earth, about the stars they had visited, about himself. "My father was a farmer in Iowa," Carter said one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the ground near the platform. "He wanted me to take over the farm, but I always looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. When I was 18, I joined Earth Defense Force. My dad didn't speak to me for 2 years after that." The armor's surface rippled gently. Carter had noticed that the colors changed based on what he was saying. Warmer colors like red and orange appeared when he talked about emotions or personal stories. Blues and purples came when he described technical things or Earth's history. "Susan thinks I'm losing my mind," Carter chuckled. "She says I'm talking to a statue." Dr. Miller had indeed become concerned about Carter's behavior. She cornered him that evening as he returned to the camp. "Will, you're spending too much time down there," she said, using his first name as she only did when worried. "It's not healthy." "I think she understands me," Carter replied. "The armor reacts differently now. It's less aggressive, more receptive." Miller frowned. "That's what worries me. We don't know what this technology is capable of. What if it's reading your thoughts? Studying our weaknesses?" Carter shook his head. "It's not like that. I can feel it. She's been alone for so long, Susan." Trapped. That night, Carter had another dream. He was floating in darkness, but this time the liquid metal around him didn't feel threatening. It carried him gently, like a river. He heard the voice again, clearer now. "Help me," it said. "I have been alone for so long." Carter woke with a start. The voice had seemed so real. He could still hear it echoing in his mind. Without thinking, he grabbed his flashlight and headed for the cave. Not bothering to wake the others, the armored figure stood as always, but something was different. The surface of the armor was moving faster, the colors shifting in patterns that almost looked like words written in light. "I can hear you," Carter said, stepping closer than he ever had before. "In my dreams." "Are you doing that?" The armor flashed bright gold, then settled into a steady pulse of blue light. Carter felt a tingle at the base of his skull, like a gentle electric current. "My name is Ilara," a voice said inside his head. "I am the last of the Luminari." Carter staggered back, almost falling. The voice was as clear as if someone had spoken aloud, but his ears had heard nothing. It was inside his mind. "How are you doing this?" he whispered. "The armor," the voice Ilara replied. "It was designed to protect, but also to connect. It learns, it adapts. It has been studying your language, your thoughts. I am sorry it took so long to reach you." Carter stood frozen, unsure if he was still dreaming. "You've been conscious this whole time? All these centuries?" A wave of sadness washed over him, but it wasn't his emotion. Somehow he was feeling what Ilara felt. "Yes," she replied. "The armor keeps me in stasis physically, but my mind is awake. Time passes differently for me. What feels like centuries to you has been both an instant and forever to me." Carter approached the armor again, his hand outstretched. The armor didn't respond with spikes this time. Instead, it seemed to reach toward him, the surface stretching slightly. "Don't touch it," Ilara warned, and Carter pulled his hand back. "The armor sees all physical contact as a threat. It would hurt you." "Why are you here?" Carter asked. "What happened to your people?" Images flashed through Carter's mind, a beautiful world with tall crystal spires, beings of light moving through them. Then fire, destruction, ships darkening the sky. "War," Ilara said simply. "My people were peaceful. We weren't prepared. When the end came, they put the children in armor to protect us. I was 7 years old. The armor was supposed to keep me safe until the war ended and they could come for me. But they never did," Carter said softly. "No, I felt them die. All of them. The armor kept me alive, moving me from place to place, hiding me. It has been my protector and my prison for 1,000 years." Carter returned to camp just before dawn, his mind reeling. He found Dr. Miller already awake, reviewing data on her tablet. "Susan, I need to tell you something," he said, sitting heavily beside her. "And you're going to think I've completely lost it." He told her about the communication with Ilara, about the mental connection, about the history of the Luminari. To his surprise, Miller didn't immediately dismiss him. "The readings from the armor have been showing increasing electrical activity," she said, showing him her tablet. "Almost like brainwaves, but more complex, and look at this." She pulled up an image of the armor's surface, enhanced and slowed down. The patterns weren't random, they formed structures similar to written language. "It's trying to communicate," Miller said, excitement in her voice. "Or she is through it." Over the next few days, Miller worked tirelessly to develop an interface based on the armor's communication patterns. She created a program that could interpret the color shifts and translate them into language. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed the whole team to hear Ilara, not just Carter. "The armor is incredible technology," Miller explained to the team. "It's not just metal, it's a complex system that adapts to threats, repairs itself, and even translates for Ilara, but it's also become overprotective. It doesn't know how to let her go." Sergeant Peters frowned. "So it's keeping her prisoner? Can't we just cut it off?" "It's not that simple," Carter said. "The armor is connected to her at a cellular level now, and it believes everything is a threat. It's been protecting her for so long it doesn't know how to stop." Private Jones shook her head. "This is way above our pay grade. What does command say?" Carter had been avoiding that question. His last report to Admiral Wright had been purposely vague. He mentioned possible communication attempts, but nothing about the mental connection or Alara's history. He knew how the military would view this discovery as a technology to be studied and weaponized. Command still plans to transport her to Earth in 5 days, Carter said carefully. But I'm not sure that's the right move. The armor might see transport as an attack. It's not our decision, sir, Peters reminded him. Carter looked toward the cave entrance. Through his growing connection with Alara, he could sense her even at this distance, her loneliness, her fear, and her growing trust in him. Maybe not, he said quietly, but what if we could help her? What if we could free her from the armor? That night, Carter dreamed again. This time, Alara showed him more of her world, of her people's technology, of the armor itself. He saw how it worked, how it was powered by emotional energy, specifically by fear. The armor had kept her afraid for centuries, feeding off her terror to maintain its protective functions. There must be a way to break its hold, Carter said in the dream. There is, Alara replied. But it requires something the armor cannot. Defend against. What's that? Alara's presence seemed to grow warmer, closer. Trust, William Carter. Complete and absolute trust. The armor has no defenses against it. Carter woke with the answer clear in his mind. He knew what he had to do. And he had less than 5 days to do it before the transport ship arrived. The next morning, Carter called a meeting with his team. They gathered around the small portable table outside their camp, the blue-white sun of Proxima Centauri rising over the dusty horizon. I have a plan to help Alara, Carter said, looking at each team member in turn. But I'll need your help, and it might mean going against orders. Dr. Miller nodded immediately. She had grown almost as attached to Alara as Carter had. I'm in. What do you need? Private Jones and Dr. White also agreed to help. But Sergeant Peters shook his head. Sir, with all due respect, this is crazy, Peters said. We're talking about an alien technology we barely understand. Command gave us clear orders to prepare it for transport. Her, Carter corrected. Not it, and she's been trapped for 1,000 years. I'm not going to let her become a lab experiment. Peters stood up. I'm sorry, Major, I have to report this to Command. Carter had expected this, I understand. But the communication system will be down for maintenance for the next 12 hours, Dr. White's orders. He nodded to White, who looked uncomfortable. But determined, Peters' face hardened. This is mutiny, sir. No, it's a rescue mission, Carter replied. You have 12 hours to decide which side you're on. After that, do what you think is right. As Peters walked away, Miller leaned forward. What's the plan? Carter explained what he had learned from Alara about the armor. It feeds on fear, her fear, our fear. It's a perfect defense system because the more frightened you are, the stronger it gets, but it has no defenses against trust. So what do we do? Jones asked. I need to approach the armor without any fear, with complete trust. And I need to touch it. Miller's eyes widened. Touch it? But you've seen what happens when anyone gets too close. Carter nodded. That's why I need your help. I need time alone with Alara without Peters interrupting. And I need you to create a distraction when the time comes. The team spent the day preparing. White worked on the communication system, making sure it really would be down so Peters couldn't contact Command. Jones set up a perimeter alarm that would warn them if Peters tried to enter the cave. Miller helped Carter understand more about the armor's patterns, looking for the weakest points. Through it all, Carter maintained his mental connection with Alara. Her presence in his mind had grown stronger, almost like a gentle hand resting on his shoulder. This plan is dangerous, she told him. The armor will see you as a threat. It could kill you. I know, Carter replied silently, but I trust you. He felt her surprise, then a wave of emotion so strong it brought tears to his eyes. No one has trusted me in 1,000 years, she said. As night fell, Carter prepared to enter the cave alone. The transport ship was now only 4 days away. Peters had spent the day watching them from a distance, clearly suspicious. Be careful, Miller said, handing Carter a small device. This will monitor your vital signs. If anything goes wrong, we'll come in after you. Carter nodded, tucking the device into his pocket. Give me 2 hours. If I haven't come out by then, Miller squeezed his arm. You'll come out with Ilara. The walk to the cavern seemed longer than usual. Carter's flashlight cast long shadows on the crystal walls. His heart was beating fast, but he worked to calm it, to push away his fear. Fear would only make the armor stronger. When he reached the central chamber, Ilara's armor was glowing brighter than he had ever seen it. The colors swirled rapidly, creating beautiful patterns across its surface. You came, her voice said in his mind. Even knowing the danger. I told you I would help you, Carter replied, stepping closer. I'm going to get you out of there, Ilara. The armor responded immediately, sprouting its defensive spikes. But Carter didn't flinch. He kept walking forward slowly and steadily. The armor senses your intention, Ilara warned. It knows what you're trying to do. Let it know, Carter said. I'm not hiding anything. I want to help you, and I believe I can. He was now only a few feet away from the armored figure. The spikes extended further, sharp points aimed at his heart, his throat, his eyes. One wrong move, and he would be impaled. Carter took a deep breath. Ilara, there's something I need to ask you. Do you want to be free? There was a pause, and for a moment, Carter worried the connection had been lost. Then, very softly, more than anything. Then you need to trust me too. When I touch the armor, don't be afraid. That's what it wants. That's how it controls you. Carter moved closer until the nearest spike was less than an inch from his chest. He could feel its sharp point through his shirt. I'm going to count to 3, he said. On 3, I'm going to reach out and touch your shoulder. Not the spikes, just the smooth part of the armor. And I need you to believe that it will be okay. I'll try, Ilara whispered in his mind. 1, Carter counted, his voice steady despite his racing heart. 2. He raised his hand slowly. The armor's spikes trembled, as if preparing to strike. 3. Carter reached forward and placed his palm flat against the smooth metal of the armor's shoulder. For a moment, nothing happened. The metal was cold under his hand, vibrating slightly like a living thing. Then, where his skin touched the metal, a small crack appeared. Light, pure, golden light spilled out from the crack. The armor reacted violently. Spikes shot toward Carter from all directions. But they stopped just before touching his skin, frozen in midair. More cracks appeared where his hand touched, spreading outward like a spiderweb. It's working, Ilara gasped in his mind. The armor is weakening. Carter kept his hand firmly in place, focusing all his thoughts on trust, on his belief that Ilara would not hurt him, that this was right. The cracks spread further, and pieces of the armor began to fall away, turning to dust as they hit the ground. Where the armor crumbled, Carter caught glimpses of what lay beneath pale skin that seemed to glow from within, with patterns of light moving beneath the surface. Keep going, he encouraged. Fight it, Ilara. It can't control you if you're not afraid. But the armor fought back. The pieces that had fallen away tried to reform, rising from the dust to reattach themselves. Carter used his free hand to brush them away, causing more cracks. Wherever he touched, the mental connection between them intensified. Suddenly, Carter wasn't just hearing Ilara's thoughts, he was feeling everything she felt. 1,000 years of isolation and fear washed over him, followed by the bright spark of hope his arrival had kindled. It was overwhelming, like drowning in an ocean of emotion. Carter's knees buckled and he fell forward. As he did, both his hands touched the armor, one on the chest, one on the face of the helmet. Cracks spread rapidly from both points of contact. The armor shuddered. Then large pieces began to break away all at once. A blinding light filled the cavern as the last pieces of the armor fell. Carter closed his eyes against the glare, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the connection. When he opened them again, the armor lay in pieces on the ground, already turning to dust. And standing before him, free for the first time in a millennium, was Ilara. Carter stared in wonder at the being before him. Ilara was tall and slender, with skin that seemed almost translucent. Beneath her skin, patterns of light moved and shifted like the northern lights on Earth. Her face was humanoid but with features. that were more delicate, more perfect than any human's. Her eyes were large and silver, with no visible pupils, and they studied him with the same intensity he had felt in their mental connection. "William Carter," she said, and her voice was like music. It was the first time he had heard her speak, aloud rather than in his mind. "You have freed me." Carter tried to stand but found his legs wouldn't support him. The mental connection had drained him more than he realized. Ilara stepped forward and offered her hand. Her movements were graceful but uncertain, as if she was relearning how to use her body after centuries of immobility. "Let me help you," she said, "as you have helped me." Her hand was warm and surprisingly solid. Carter had half expected her to feel like light or energy, but she was real and physical. With her help, he got to his feet. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Does it hurt to be free of the armor?" Ilara looked down at her own body with curiosity. She was wearing a simple white garment that seemed to be made of the same material as her skin, glowing softly in the dim cave. "It does not hurt," she said. "It feels ... strange, like being born again. I had forgotten what it was to move, to breathe, to speak with my own voice." The dust that had been her armor continued to crumble away, disappearing completely as if it had never existed. Only a few larger pieces remained on the platform where she had stood for so long. "We should get back to the others," Carter said, remembering Peters and the approaching transport ship. "They'll be worried." As they moved toward the cave entrance, Carter noticed that Ilara's feet didn't quite touch the ground. She seemed to float just an inch or two above it. When she saw him watching, she smiled. "My people were not meant for worlds with such strong gravity," she explained. "The armor helped me adapt. Now I must remember how to adjust myself." Carter was about to reply when the cave was suddenly flooded with bright light. Standing at the entrance was Sergeant Peters, holding a powerful spotlight. Behind him were 3 security officers in Earth Defense Force uniforms, all holding weapons. "Step away from the alien, Major," Peters ordered. Carter moved protectively. In front of Ilara. "Stand down, Sergeant. That's an order." Peters shook his head. "Not this time, sir. I contacted the transport ship. They sent an advance team. The alien technology is to be secured immediately." One of the security officers stepped forward. "Major William Carter, you are relieved of command pending investigation. Please step aside." Carter didn't move. "You don't understand what you're doing. Ilara is a sentient being, the last of her kind. She's not a piece of technology to be studied." "The armor was the technology we were interested in," Peters said, his eyes moving to the few remaining pieces on the platform. "What have you done with it?" "It's gone," Carter said. "It was a prison, not a weapon, and I destroyed it." The security officer raised his weapon. "This is your final warning, Major. Step aside." Carter felt Ilara's hand on his shoulder. "Do not risk yourself for me, William," she said softly. "I have faced worse than these men." Before Carter could respond, the cavern began to shake. Small rocks fell from the ceiling, and the crystal walls vibrated. The security officers looked around in alarm. "What's happening?" Peters demanded. "What is she doing?" But it wasn't Ilara causing the tremors. The few remaining pieces of armor on the platform were moving, pulling themselves together. As they watched, the pieces formed a small sphere that pulsed with angry red light. "The armor," Ilara whispered. "It's trying to reform." The sphere rose into the air, spinning faster and faster. It seemed to be gathering energy, growing brighter. "By the second, everyone out now," Carter shouted. "The cave is going to collapse." The security officers didn't need to be told twice. They turned and ran, Peters right behind them. Carter grabbed Ilara's hand and pulled her toward the exit, but she resisted. "I can stop it," she said. "The armor is still connected to me. It's trying to reclaim me." "How?" Carter asked, looking back at the spinning sphere of light. "I need to convince it that I'm no longer afraid," Ilara said. "That I no longer need its protection?" She stepped toward the sphere, her body beginning to glow with the same intensity. Carter wanted to pull her back to protect her, but he understood this was her fight. He had freed her from the armor, but she needed to free herself from its Control? Ilara raised her hands, and the patterns of light beneath her skin began to move faster, brighter. She spoke in her native language, words that sounded like singing to Carter's ears. The sphere responded, pulsing in rhythm with her words. The cave continued to shake, more violently now. Carter had to brace himself against the wall to stay upright. Ilara, we need to go. Almost done? She called back, her voice strained. The sphere was now directly in front of her, only inches from her face. It had stopped spinning and hung motionless in the air. Ilara spoke one final word, sharp and commanding. The sphere shuddered, then collapsed in on itself with a flash of light so bright that Carter had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, the sphere was gone. In its place was a small crystal, no bigger than his thumb. It glowed with a soft blue light, peaceful and contained. Ilara picked up the crystal and turned to Carter with a smile. It is done. The armor's energy is contained, harmless now. The cave gave one final shake, and a large section of the ceiling came crashing down where the platform had been. Carter rushed to Ilara and pulled her toward the exit. Time to go. They ran through the tunnel as rocks fell around them. Carter could see daylight ahead, the cave entrance still clear. They burst out into the open just as the entrance collapsed behind them, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Dr. Miller and Private Jones rushed to meet them, their faces full of concern and wonder as they saw Ilara for the first time. Are you okay? Miller asked, looking from Carter to Ilara and back. Carter nodded, still catching his breath. We're fine. Where are Peters and the security team? They're calling the transport ship, Jones said. Peters is pretty angry. He's saying you destroyed valuable technology. Carter looked at the small crystal in Ilara's hand. Not destroyed. Transformed. Ilara held out the crystal to them. This contains all the knowledge and power of the armor, but without its fear and aggression. My people's legacy preserved in a form that cannot harm anyone. Miller stared at the crystal in fascination. All that technology in something so small. Size is irrelevant to energy, Ilara said with a smile. As your own scientists know. The sound of an approaching aircraft made them all look up. The transport ship was early, already entering the moon's atmosphere. What now? Jones asked, looking nervously at Carter. You're technically relieved of command, sir. Carter looked at Ilara, who met his gaze with her silver eyes. The connection between them was still there, though different now. Less overwhelming. More like a gentle awareness of each other's presence. Now, Carter said, we make sure Earth Defense Force understands exactly who and what they're dealing with. Ilara isn't a specimen or a weapon. She's a visitor, an ambassador from a civilization far older than ours, and she deserves to be treated with respect. Ilara's expression softened. And what of you, William Carter? What will happen to the man who freed me? Carter shrugged. Probably a court-martial, possibly prison. But it was worth it. Ilara reached out and touched his face gently. Perhaps there is another way. My people had much to teach yours before the end came. Perhaps that can still happen. As the transport ship descended toward them, Carter felt a new sense of hope. Whatever happened next, he had done the right thing. He had trusted his instincts, trusted Ilara, and in doing so he had freed the last child of a lost civilization from her prison of fear. The real journey was just beginning. The transport ship landed in a cloud of dust 100 yards from the camp. Its engines hummed as the main door opened and a ramp extended to the ground. A woman in an admiral's uniform walked down the ramp, flanked by more security officers. Admiral Doris Wright was shorter than Carter had expected from their video calls, but her presence was commanding. Major Carter, she said as she approached. Her eyes moved from Carter to Ilara, widening slightly at the sight of the luminous being. I see the situation has changed since your last report. Carter stood at attention. Yes, ma'am. This is Ilara, the last survivor of the Luminary civilization. She was trapped in the armor, not part of it. Admiral Wright studied Ilara with open curiosity. Sergeant Peters says you destroyed valuable technology that could have benefited Earth. With respect? Admiral, Carter replied, the armor was a prison, not a weapon. And it was dangerous, Ilara stepped forward. The small crystal in her hand glowed softly. Your officer speaks the truth. The armor was designed to protect, but after 1,000 years alone, it had become corrupted by fear. William Carter freed me at great risk to himself. Admiral Wright looked surprised to hear Ilara speak perfect English. You understand our language. The armor learned your language from studying your team, Ilara explained. That knowledge transferred to me. Peters pushed his way forward. Ma'am, regardless of what it says, Carter disobeyed direct orders. He should be arrested immediately. Admiral Wright held up her hand to silence him. I want to hear more before making any decisions. Dr. Miller, what's your assessment of the situation? Susan Miller stepped forward nervously. The armor was a remarkable technology, Admiral, but it was also sentient in its own way. It had become possessive of Ilara, trapping her instead of protecting her. Major Carter found a way to free her without destroying the knowledge contained in the armor. She nodded toward the crystal in Ilara's hand. And what exactly is that? Wright asked, looking at the crystal. A data storage device, in your terms, Ilara said. It contains all the knowledge and technology of my people, but in a form that cannot harm anyone. I would like to share this knowledge with Earth as thanks for my freedom. Wright's expression changed from suspicion to interest. What kind of knowledge? Energy production that doesn't harm your environment. Medical technology that could extend human life by decades. Faster than light travel, and much more. A murmur ran through the gathered officers. Admiral Wright looked from the crystal to Carter and back to Ilara. Why would you share such valuable knowledge with us? She asked. We're strangers to you, Ilara smiled. Because William Carter showed me that humans are capable of trust and compassion, even for beings they don't understand. He risked everything to help me with no guarantee of reward. That kind of courage deserves recognition. Wright considered this for a long moment. Major Carter, you and your team will return to the ship with us. We need to debrief everyone thoroughly. As for you, Ilara, would you be willing to come to Earth as an official representative of your people? I would be honored, Ilara said. But I have one condition. Which is? William Carter must not be punished for helping me. He acted with honor, even when it meant disobeying orders, Admiral Wright sighed. That's not entirely up to me, but I'll do what I can. 3 days later, Carter sat in a conference room aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship in orbit around Earth. He had spent hours being debriefed by military officials and scientists. Now he waited nervously to learn his fate. The door opened, and Admiral Wright entered, followed by ELA R. Carter stood quickly. Admiral. At ease, Major, Wright said, taking a seat across from him. We've reviewed all the evidence and testimony from your team. Carter nodded, preparing himself for the worst. And your decision? Officially, you're being reassigned, Wright said. Your new position is diplomatic liaison to our first official alien ambassador. She nodded toward Ilara. Unofficially? You're a very lucky man. The knowledge Ilara has already shared has convinced the Joint Chiefs that your actions, while against protocol, were the right ones. Relief washed over Carter. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me, Wright replied. Thank your friend here. She made a very compelling case on your behalf. She stood and straightened her uniform. I'll leave you two to discuss your new assignment. You'll be stationed at our new interstellar relations facility in Colorado. Report there in 1 week. After the Admiral left, Carter turned to Ilara with a smile. You saved my career. You saved my life, she replied simply. It seemed a fair exchange. Ilara looked different now. She wore a simple Earth-style dress, though the patterns of light still moved beneath her skin. She had adapted quickly to human customs and society in the short time since her rescue. How are you adjusting to Earth? Carter asked. It's overwhelming, she admitted. So many people, so much noise and activity, but also beautiful in ways I never imagined. Your oceans remind me of my homeworld. Carter noticed she was still carrying the crystal, now hanging from a chain around her neck. Have you shared much from that yet? Only a small fraction, Ilara said. There is knowledge in here that humanity isn't ready for yet. I will share it gradually as your people learn and grow. Carter nodded in understanding. And what about you? What do you want, now that you're free? Ilara was quiet for a moment. For 1,000 years, my only desire was freedom. Now that I have it, I'm not sure what to want next. She looked at him with her silver eyes. But I know I want to continue working with you, William Carter. Our connection helped me break free of my prison. I think it could help build a bridge between our peoples. Carter felt a warm feeling spread through him. The connection between them had changed since Ilara's freedom, becoming less overwhelming but more meaningful. It wasn't just about rescuing her anymore, it was about what they could accomplish together. I'd like that, he said. 1 month later, Carter stood beside Ilara on a mountain overlook in Colorado. The new interstellar relations facility spread. Out in the valley below them, its gleaming buildings a symbol of humanity's first steps into a larger universe. Your people learn quickly, Ilara said, watching workers construct a new wing based on luminary architectural principles. In just a few weeks, they've already adapted some of my people's basic technologies. We're good at adapting, Carter agreed. It's how we've survived this long, Ilara turned to face him. The knowledge I've shared so far is just the beginning. With time, humans could reach the stars the way my people once did. And you'll be there to guide us? Carter asked. Ilara smiled, the light beneath her skin pulsing gently with emotion. For as long as I'm needed. I was preserved for a reason, William. Perhaps this is it to help another species avoid the mistakes that destroyed mine. Carter looked out at the facility again, thinking of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Earth was changing, growing, preparing to take its place among the stars. And it had all started because he had trusted his instincts, because he had reached out and touched an alien armor without fear. From prison to partnership, he said softly. Not a bad journey. Ilara took his hand, her warm fingers intertwining with his. The crystal at her throat glowed brighter for a moment, as if in agreement. The journey is just beginning, she said. For both of us. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light across the valley, Carter felt a sense of peace he had never known before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, the human who had trusted, and the alien who had been trapped in armor since she was a child, until he touched her and it crumbled, the end of one story, the beginning of a much greater one.